My Lords, I have some serious reservations about Amendments 348 and the related 349. I spoke at length against them when the same amendment was raised at the Employment Rights Bill, and I'm not going to repeat everything I said there. I was interested in the noble lady Baroness Chakrabarti talking about maybe we could look at drafting, because one of my problems is the wording of this repeated amendment, which I think is all over the place, quite dangerous, very broad, and could get us into all sorts of unintended trouble. So let me illustrate. I thought that the noble lady Baroness Smith of Llanfaes spoke passionately and actually excellently about some of the concerns there are about, not concerns, the real life problems of sexual harassment at work. And many of us will recognise that. But as I say, I have concerns about the language of this particular amendment. When we talk about a legal mandate for employers to introduce proactive and preventative measures to protect workers from psychological and emotional abuse, we already heard from the noble Lord Panic, psychological abuse, emotional abuse, very broad, and what the nature of proactive and preventative measures might be to stop what is very hard to define, it would seem to me, could be real overreach, could be quite coercive, potentially could be quite manipulative. But I'm particularly nervous about the use of the gender-responsive approach that's advocated, particularly in relation to training, and which we're told, in the wording of the amendment, by the way, a gender-responsive approach means taking into account the various needs, interests and experiences of people of different gender identities, including women and girls. If I could just state that women and girls are not a subset of gender identities, of whatever those gender identities are. I think that's both insulting, on the one hand, gender identities are at the very least contentious. And I think that this language confusion, for me, drags this amendment into a potential political minefield here. Because I am actually familiar with the way that gender-responsive approaches are being used in the workplace at the present time to undermine women and girls. I was fortunate enough today to have had a meeting here in Parliament with the Darlington Nurses Union. The Darlington nurses are in dispute with their NHS employer because they felt sexually unsafe in their nurses' changing room, their single-sex nurses' changing room, which, by the way, was fought for as part of health and safety at work in the past, and they have a place that they can get changed, and they felt unsafe when a gender-inclusive policy allowed a male who identifies as a woman to use their space. And this has led to all sorts of problems in relation to what safety at work is. They felt as though there was a degree of sexual harassment going on and so forth. And they also talked about, and so I'm just pointing out that this is like a difficult area, can we at least acknowledge it? They talked about one of their members, Jennifer Mellay, who's a 40-year-old NHS nurse who has had 12 years of unblemished service in a hospital in Surrey. And I thought it was worth using this illustration because I know the noble Lord, the Minister, was very passionate earlier, and rightly so, about those people who have to suffer, emergency workers who have to suffer racial abuse. And Jennifer Mellay's story is important because she's a black nurse who was dealing with a patient who happened to be a convicted male paedophile in a hospital in Surrey. Nurse Mellay phoned the neurologist and referred to this patient as he, Mr., while talking to the urologist on the phone. The patient became very aggressive, started shouting racist abuse, used the most vile racial slurs, lunged at nurse Jennifer Mellay, and that was a terrible thing to happen. You would have expected her employers would have protected her from that. It was racial in that instance, but a female frontline worker. What actually happened was the NHS... Yes, of course.
Give way from...
Yes, of course.
So, the noble lady Baroness Fox, to some extent, is repeating some of the perfectly sensible points that she made in the debate earlier in the year. Could I just point out that at committee stage, what these are probing amendments, no more, no less. It is accepted from the go-go that they could be improved, and what I think would be helpful for the committee is not a long list of the things that are wrong with it. We accept that there may be some things that are wrong with it, but what would be really, really helpful from the noble lady, the Baroness, is some suggestions, if she is unhappy with the wording, as what she might suggest could be put in its place, if, as I think is the case, she is acknowledging that there is a problem that needs to be dealt with.
The point that I was going on to make, because I think that's a fair comment, the point that I was going to make was that she was suspended for misgendering, using a gender-inclusive policy similar to that advocated in this amendment. And
what would you use instead?
Yeah, no. So that I suggested. Sorry, who's sitting down? Right. I suggested then that I wasn't happy with the wording of this amendment. It's just simply been repeated. So I did make a speech which I thought was reasonable at the time. This is actually not the same speech, but I'm raising some of the issues because I would say, which is why I urgently earlier pointed out, why would you use that approach to protecting women and girls when women in the workplace are at present actually being the victims of some of these gender-related policies? Therefore, if the amendment comes back as a more straightforward, narrowly defined sexual harassment at work, then I would be much more interested in hearing from it. But the amendment is repeated rather than just my speech. It's exactly the same wording that I objected to before. No account has been taken of any of the criticisms made then at committee, at probing stage. So I think I can reasonably say I would like us all to not repeat ourselves, including with this amendment.